Good evening and welcome again to Ideas at Work and Beyond. It is truly a privilege tonight to have three fine young gentlemen that are running, that are eager to get your votes to be a public servant for the 4th Congressional District. Teddy Roosevelt said a lot of things. And one of the things he said that I really appreciate is, the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who strives valiantly and knows the great enthusiasms and great devotions, and spends himself on a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. This evening we're going to spend an hour talking with three men that are seeking to be your congressional representative in the 4th Congressional District, and I find it an honor to be able to put together a program like this where you, the viewers, will have an opportunity to call in with your questions, and we'll also have an email address up there. You can email them. It'll come right to my handy-dandy BlackBerry. We'll ask the questions that way. And with my intrepid co-host, Al Robertson, by the way, Hat City blog, if you want to see a bunch of nonsense, just go on that. We went out and we had some interviews on the street as well. So it's going to be a very interactive show. We're delighted you tuned in, and I can give you one thing. When we find out where LeBron James is going, we will interrupt this debate for something truly important, and we'll make that announcement. So thanks for joining us. But first of all, by a draw of straws, we made the order, and we're going to start. Let me just quickly introduce. We have Rob Merkel, Dan DiBasella, and Rick Torres. And we're going to start with opening comments of 2 minutes, and we're going to start with Rob Merkel.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having us back. My name is Rob Merkel, and I'm running for Congress in the 4th District. I got into this race having never been involved in politics before because, like a lot of my fellow citizens, we were very upset with what we saw the political insiders and the party machine doing. Raising our taxes, spending out of control, not worrying about how we were doing as citizens. I've seen bailouts go nowhere, TARP funds, stimulus funds, takeovers of our healthcare system, cap and trade. Someone has to step up and do something. My father used to quote Edmund Burke, who said, "All it takes for evil to succeed is good men do nothing." And I have the ability and the background to get this done. So my platform is very simple. It's about creating jobs in the state of Connecticut by addressing national policies. One is to shrink budgets in the federal level 3 to 5% every single year until our budget is balanced and our debt's paid off. Those are bite-sized pieces that we can take off easily without having to take 25 or 30% out of a federal budget. Number 2 is restrict the federal government to specific areas outlined in the Constitution. There's about 18 areas in the Enumerated Powers Clause, and the federal government is involved in almost every aspect of our lives. The third thing is tax reform. We need to eliminate the corporate tax rate because it is an incentive for jobs to leave our country and go overseas, where they compete against us and take American wages. I'm also into Homeland Security and strong national defense, but we'll get to that later in the show. Thanks.
Dan?
Marty, thanks for having us. I'm Dan DiBasella, and I'm running for Congress because I believe there's a better way. All what we've seen come out of Washington for the last 2 years has been more spending, more debt, and an economy that has hit a new normal that is hurting Fairfield County families. And what I want to do is actually do what I've done in my short political career in Hartford, which is to bring the values of Ronald Reagan back to Washington, D.C. Values of small government, free enterprise, and individual liberty. And I believe that we Republicans have an obligation to not just be the party of no, but to become the party of ideas again. Let me give you a few specific ones that we'll talk about tonight. One is we have to recognize that the stimulus package has been a failure, and we should repeal it and instead replace it with a payroll tax cut that will actually give $1,500 to every middle-class family, will actually give a tax cut for small businesses, and will actually reduce the deficit by $150 billion. Second, we need a federal spending cap to say that the federal government by 2016 can be no more than 20% of the economy, and force politicians of both parties to make trade-offs. And third, we need to repeal Obamacare and actually replace it with something that truly cuts costs for the middle class. I do believe there's a better way, and I've proven that I can actually fight for it. As the state senator for the eastern part of Fairfield County, I've been proud to fight up in Hartford for smaller government, even when I'm at odds with our own governor, Governor Rell. I have proposed budgets that shrink the size of Connecticut state government by 5%, and I will bring that experience and that passion to Washington to make sure that we get the job done. Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Dan. Rick Torres.
Well, I'm running for Congress today because our country's in a lot of trouble, and we're going to have to decide what it is that we want to be when we grow up. Whether we want the country that we lived in and our parents lived in and enjoy it and appreciate it, or we want to be the type of country that looks more like a statist country, a country that controls its people day and day. Our country is growing so much out of control that our government now acts as a tyrant against us. Our country was founded on the proposition that human nature was to be controlled and nothing more. And so our Constitution was written in a way that allowed for human initiative, freedom, liberty to exist, and always with an eye towards tyranny. And our founders knew very well that the government someday might threaten us, and they warned us against us. Thomas Jefferson said that we might have to have a revolution every 25 years, because instantly from the point that our country was founded, people began to try and grow that government. But I'll have you know that for 160 years our country existed on less than 2 to 3% of GDP, and now, since 1911, our country has grown out of control. Our government has grown out of control, and Barack Obama has put us on hyperdrive. We must decide to be the type of country that we were founded as, and not the type of country that individual politicians, and regrettably too, some Republicans believe that there are good government answers for us, and in my estimation, we the people are the best answer, and never government. And I'll have you ask yourself this question. Think about it. If you wanted to buy a television, a washer, a dryer, a refrigerator, would you want a television made by government, or would you want it made by the free market? And that's why we must depend on the free market and never on government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your opening statements. Our first caller this evening is David. And David, you have a question for the candidates?
I do, thank you. My question is, Ridgefield is slated to receive, I believe, about another $500,000 from stimulus money in order to pay for special education in the public schools. My question is, do you think that's pork, number one? And number two, if it's to be repealed or refused, should Ridgefield raise property taxes to cover that and still provide those special ed services to our kids?
Excellent question. Thank you very much for calling. We're going to go down the line here. What about that? There's a $500,000 earmarked for Ridgefield, apparently, to help offset special ed costs. It's good to say, hey, let's cut out the pork, but when it's your ox that's being gored, what happens? Why don't we go down the line, just a minute response to that, and then
Sure.
follow up.
Well, I think my first question is $500,000 going to the Ridgefield Public Schools. That's going to have an impact in 1 year. What's going to happen the next year when you've got all these teachers and programs in place that are no longer funded? So taxes are going to go up one way or the other. The question is whether the federal government's paying for it now or we're paying for it now. So the people of Ridgefield need to decide if this is something that they want, and if it is, then they need to be prepared for that tax increase themselves. I personally think the federal government should be out of the education system altogether. I don't think they add value in that respect, and I think if we bring competition and actually allow the good teachers to prosper, and because they take care of our kids, they teach them well, and the situations we have in place now protect the bad teachers, and that increased costs for everyone, and is not good for our kids.
Okay, Dan, your thoughts on this?
Well, first, the premise of the question is wrong. Is actually the state of Connecticut got $2 billion in stimulus funds that we used to plug the hole in our budget. What we did was we then turned around and we gave $500,000 to Ridgefield for special education that was due to them within the ECS formula, the education cost sharing. So if you were to repeal the stimulus package, it's actually not going to impact Ridgefield. It's going to impact the state of Connecticut. And the question is, does the state of Connecticut budget actually get more of a deficit? And the answer is yes, we should repeal that. We should repeal the stimulus package and replace it with something that will actually stimulate the economy, a payroll tax cut. The state of Connecticut should make that up by reducing spending. And this is what we failed to do as a state. We need to cut the number of employees, make benefits for those employees in line with the public sector, consolidate 23 agencies, privatize agencies. All the things that I've proposed we do with the state of Connecticut can ensure that we still give money for special education and the things that we actually need, rather than the bloated state government we currently have.
Okay. Rick, your thoughts on this?
Well, I disagree with Dan in that it's not that it's the state of Connecticut's issue. The issue itself that is at hand at this point is income redistribution, taking from some and giving to others. I want to take a pledge, and I'd like my fellow Republicans running for this office to agree with this. Income redistribution is theft, and theft alone. If we take from some to give to others, we have violated a very significant tenet of at least my Christian religion and the tenets of how this country was founded. If property rights mean nothing at all, then therefore nothing matters. None of the other protected ideas that this country was founded on matter, because property is everything. And we must protect property in this country. And therefore, we must decide that we are not going to take from the rich and give to the poor anymore, because it's destructive. It's destructive in two ways. When we take from the rich, we hurt the economy. When we give to the poor, we destroy the poor and enslaving them into government programs that they no longer can do. Now, the issue with respect to Ridgefield, the best answer is that if Ridgefield wants that, Ridgefield should pay for it. And that's the way it should be. That's something that Ridgefield wants, by all means do it. Local governing is something that I agree to. But I don't agree in taking money from somebody in Utah to do it otherwise.
Okay. Caller, are you there? Caller, are you there? Yes, you had a questions for the candidate? Go right ahead. Yes, go right ahead. You had a question for the candidate? Ask that question one more time, please. Okay, excellent question. I'll reiterate it. The caller wanted to know, will you give him full control over his Social Security money to invest it as he sees fit? Rick, we'll start with you and go down the line.
That would have been ideal. I mean, that would have been a great system to implement in the beginning, is to give people control of their own money. That would have been something that I'd certainly support. And people that choose to invest their money in a gamble and it pays off, great. But if it doesn't, well, that's your loss. That should have been the way that we designed the system. Unfortunately, the system is so bankrupt and so massive that answer is no longer something that we can apply at this point. We have to figure out what we're going to do with the Social Security along with Medicare and Medicaid, because they loom over us as the biggest threat to freedom that we have in this country, those three programs.
Dan, what about you? Shouldn't the nanny state, shouldn't government take care of these big, difficult decisions like how to invest your money for you? Or do you think you can do it yourself?
I think Rick's absolutely right on this. If we were starting off with a blank sheet of paper, we'd probably design a system like that. The problem is, everyone thinks there's this big Social Security trust fund that's sitting out there with trillions and trillions of dollars, and geez, just give me my share. There is no trust fund. We have basically taken that and spent it all. Spent it on current expenses. So all that's left in the Social Security Trust Fund are bonds that the government is going to need to pay back. So there is no pot of money that we can just divvy up among individuals. Instead, it's all IOUs. So we need to deal with this Social Security problem by looking at all the options, much like they did in 1986, in a very bipartisan way, to actually look at how to fix Social Security. But unfortunately, a complete privatization is just not feasible because the money's not there.
Rob, your thoughts on this? Are we broke?
Absolutely. And it's going to take a while to get out of this mess. I mean, there are hard decisions that need to be made, and I don't think professional politicians have the political will to do that. They say Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are the third rail in politics. Well, that's what's killing us right now. And if we don't make the hard decisions in terms of means testing, changing the retirement age, ultimately transferring it out of the federal hands, I think is a great idea, but it's going to take a while for us to get there.
I mean, it's a bit of a conundrum because, well, you just stepped on the third rail. Because if you say, well, we're going to raise the retirement age so it isn't 65 but it's older, right there, you're alienating quite a few senior citizens' votes.
Look, the medicine may not taste good, but it's what we need to get better.
And there's something else to be said from that standpoint, what you just said. When Social Security was first founded, people weren't living as long as they do now. So essentially the promise is still the same. The promise is that we'll help you when you need help, not necessarily when you want the help. Yeah. And so there's the third rail for you. We have to deal with that. Yeah. The reality is, when it was instituted, 65, most people were dead. Today, it's 75 and people are going just fine, and they're looking at 85 and they're still doing well.
85
so now, so how do we do?
Well, and we need a cultural change around it as well. Is too many people think Social Security is a retirement program. It's not. It's actually there to keep people out of poverty. But that's not meant to be the only thing that you live on in retirement. And I think a lot of people out there still think, oh, I don't have to save anything because Social Security is just going to be there. Yeah. We need a cultural shift in this country to recognize what Social Security is it's a program to keep people out of poverty, and that's something I think we all agree with.
All right. Caller, are you there? Caller, are you there? All right, we had some probing questions, primarily for you, Mr. Merkel, and you, Mr. DiVasella. Let me see if I can hit the high notes on this. This is going to be rough, so I hope you can handle this. Okay, Rob.
Yes.
1. You say that you are a federalist, but you are in favor of using Interstate Commerce Clause to continue to criminalize marijuana, and you have attacked me, I guess this is from the Torres camp, for wanting to legalize it on the federal level. Question number 2. You might want to take notes.
Yeah.
How is your plan to force banks to make loans to small business any different than the Community Reinvestment Act that requires banks to give loans to unqualified homeowners? And following 3, Rob, are you a viable candidate in the general election? Those are 3. And you're next, so
all right.
I want to take a sip of water.
All right. Great question. First of all, I never advocated using the Commerce Clause to continually to criminalize marijuana. But I am not in favor of decriminalizing it or legalizing it. And unlike my opponent, Mr. Torres, who in front of the Libertarian caucus, when they were vetting both of us, he agreed to legalize all drugs without exception. Yet in a subsequently published article, he said he would only legalize marijuana, decriminalize it. So I'm not sure exactly where he stands, but I'm not about to take a populist view on drugs. I think that the violence that we are seeing from drug trade across the United States and southern border is abhorrent. It's killing our citizens and it's taking over our land. And Mr. DiVasella, you don't think we need a fence because you think we can stop the illegal immigration problem by jailing business owners. Well, the drug dealers and the terrorists and the human traffickers don't care about our laws. They're not here to get a job. They're here to sell drugs and traffic humans and blow us up. So the only thing that's going to stop them is a military presence and a fence. As far as the second, forcing banks to lend, that was never my position. I think that was misconstrued by one of Mr. Torres' overzealous supporters. My sentiment was there are certain programs in the federal government that actually do benefit businesses, and one of them is the SBA. So out of I believe the number was $14 trillion budget, 99% of that came from banks lending on their balance sheets to companies that were credit worthy. And these were loans specifically designed to initiate businesses and grow small businesses, of which I have one. It's not forcing them to do anything. Where I said there was a mandate back in, I believe, January, was with banks that had received TARP funds that were sitting on that money to do mergers and acquisitions of their weaker competitors, whereby what they would do is fire all the staff at the weaker bank. So in effect, TARP funds didn't go for what it was supposed to be used for, and people lost their jobs. So if the government's giving money to a bank under TARP, and that bank is sitting on the money, there should be an obligation for that bank to use the money in a credible, underwritten loan.
Okay, Mr. Torres, what about that? Do you want to legalize all drugs?
Well, let's put it in perspective first. What I'd like to tell the public right now is to consider the situation of prohibition. We created, Rob is trying to suggest to you that the laws that we have in place have somehow helped the situation in which we're in. And what I'm saying is that the laws that we have in place have created massive levels of wealth in the wrong hands, in criminals that his own father put away. Okay, that we have cartels in South America that are billionaires. They control countries. We want to understand why Mexico is in the condition that it's in. It's because the drug cartels control Mexico. They control parts of Colombia. I mean whole parts. And so then the point is that prohibition is a failure. And so it's not about the notion of spreading drugs and having a country that embraces drug use. No, it's having a program that makes sense. A program that is not going to enslave all of the young kids in the inner city that have no other outlet than drug sales. Because the school systems fail, the government schools fail, because of everything government in their lives failed. And so then they turn to selling drugs. And then ultimately some kid selling marijuana in the city of Bridgeport ends up going to jail for 5 years, say. He comes out a hardened criminal. And now you got a bigger problem on your hands. And Mr. Merkel doesn't care about that guy, it seems.
You would
he
rather
only
have
cares,
our kids
excuse
on
me,
drugs?
Excuse me one second. I don't want anybody on drugs.
Then why legalize
I don't
them?
use drugs. I haven't used drugs, sir.
Then why
it's a
legalize them?
No, because it's not an issue of protecting everybody. I don't drink much either, sir. You know what I do? I have a beer every so often. Do you drink a lot? Should I get into your life and tell you how much beer to drink? Because marijuana and liquor are the same.
No, they're not.
They're the same. Don't tell me they're not the same. I have a degree in biology.
Okay.
You have a degree in finance. I have one in biology.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We have what we refer to as the Peanut Gallery, Dave Straight and Al Robinson, and they have some questions as well. Al, what are your thoughts? And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the candidates for coming down here today. And it's a little lively debate so far today. But let's get to my first question here. Each one of the candidates here have talked about oil drilling and talked about their stance in terms of the increased oil drilling. Currently, we have a oil spill in the Gulf that is now the largest in the history of the world. And Mr. DiBasella said in a press release back in September of 2008 that he was for improving or increasing oil drilling and improving offshore drilling in a safe, environmentally mindful approach. Mr. Merkel has gone so far as to say he wants to not only increase oil spilling but also to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency. And Mr. Torres, I'm going to assume that your stance in oil drilling is somewhat similar in terms of you don't want to decrease drilling or maybe increase drilling or possibly to less regulation to encourage more businesses to do drilling. In light of the BP disaster in the Gulf, what is your stance on oil drilling? Have you changed your views, or do you think there should be less regulation to allow more oil drilling in the Gulf and in other areas?
Well, why don't we start with Dan, and then we'll loop around. Oil drilling, it's a big issue.
And
81 days, I think, we're in this.
It is, and we have to recognize that, look, we've had an accident. That doesn't mean we should stop drilling for oil. We still need to drill for oil, but we need to do so in an environmentally safe way. And the problem in the Gulf was a failure of regulation, a failure of regulatory bodies, because there was a $450,000 valve that if BP had put that on this pipeline, they could have turned this off on day one. But instead, BP came to the government and asked for a waiver for this in the week before this rig went operational, and the government granted it. So this was a failure of our regulations. And what we actually need is we need to have stringent environmental regulations on oil drilling. We do. This is a place where the government has a role. But President Obama, in saying we should stop all oil drilling, let's put a moratorium on it for 6 months, that's an overreaction. Because if we're going to solve our energy crisis, we absolutely need alternatives like solar power, wind power, but we can't do anything in the short term unless we get off foreign oil, and the easiest way to do that is to increase our domestic oil production.
It is a catch-22, though, isn't it? I mean, I got to be honest, because I was on this show, I was drill, baby, drill. And I'm telling you, this thing that's happening in the Gulf is taking my breath away. You know, it's just hideous to see what's happening. And you know, the biggest, and I know I'm not running for anything here, but just throw this out there, but the biggest statistic I had is when the hurricane came through and all those oil rigs were out there, not a drop of oil was lost. But here we got this thing down at the bottom of and we can't plug it. Ron.
Well, here's the issue. Yes, it's a tragedy. I think it's been compounded by the fact that the administration's been dragging their feet. They've been pontificating but not allowing things to actually happen. the EPA was stopping skimmers because they felt that a 1% oil saturation in the water output was too high. Well, I think 1% in the water is better than 90%. And we can't lose sight of the fact that the reason we're drilling in such deep water is because the environmentalists are continually pushing us further and further offshore. So when you get into a mile deep water, the engineering challenges and the environmental challenges are exponentially greater. If this exact accident had happened on land, it would have been contained in 12 hours. And the fact is, the president wants us to increase our supply of alternative energy. Well, alternative energy technology is not there to support our demands. So we have enough natural energy reserves, oil shale, coal, natural gas, that we can be a net exporter of energy. It's very simple. We can drill in a very small footprint and extract oil from a very large footprint underground and protect the environment. We can create millions of jobs in this country in a span of 10 years.
Okay, Al, you have a follow-up, but we want to go to Rick as well. Go ahead, Rick.
You can just go to Mr. Torres first. Mr. Torres, please.
I like energy. We're using it right now. We can't get around it. I had a fella that his office was next to mine, and he painted his whole card, "Go to hell, BP," and you're killing all the animals and this and that. And the irony is that it's on his car. If he was on a horse, I wouldn't mind, but he's in his car, okay? So what's the point? The bottom line is regulations, more stringent regulations. The reason that BP got away with it is because they could. And when a regulator comes in and some big shot comes in and somebody has political influence, they go to that regulator and say, "That's a good friend of mine, take care of him," okay? That's the problem with having politicians involved with regulations. Okay, so that BP got away with murder because they could. And you make it more stringent, they'll get away with that as well. Now, force
what's
people.
The answer?
The answer is don't make us go out into a 1 mile deep water zone. Let us drill where we can drill safely. That's what should have happened. If we had been in 300, 400 feet of water, you can send men down there. In a mile deep, you can't send anything down there. But I'll have you know one thing, and this is from a science standpoint. I don't think that we've put the brightest minds on this job. If I were the President of the United States and this happened under my watch, I would have had an immediate conference in Louisiana. I would have brought the brightest minds in the world, and I'd have shipped them in for free, and I paid them whatever they had to be paid out of BP's money. But we would have put the brightest minds on this immediately. But we haven't done that. 80 somewhat days out, we still haven't done that.
What's your scientific background? What are your
I have a degree from Washington University in St. Louis in biochemistry, microbiology, UConn Health Center in biogenetics, yada yada.
All right. Al, you had a follow-up.
Just once again, in terms of the Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Merkel said that he would like to eliminate it in regards to this oil spill. I just want to find out the other candidates' view on this. Do you support eliminating the Environmental Protection Agency, yes or no?
No. I actually do believe the federal government does have a role in protecting our environment. And whereas the EPA can be streamlined in a lot of areas, I do believe we should have that at the federal level.
All right.
I didn't answer.
We'll go right ahead.
And you want me to, because
I
I'm
do,
sure there's
yes.
going to be, this is a way to split the team anyhow, right?
Okay.
Rob's right. There's no federal role for an EPA in the Constitution. We must be principled. I'm begging Americans, wake up, be principled. Be principled because, by the way, just so you know, every state has its own EPA. Some cities have their own EPA. We layer ground on top of layer of government regulations. Okay, enough. Let the states handle it. I gotta tell you, if the Louisiana governor had handled this, we might be in better shape right now. Instead of letting it go to Washington and have it be that far away. It should have been handled by Mississippi and Louisiana and the bordering states, and they would have done what was right.
All right. Dave Straight, and by the way, he has an incredible website. What's it called? Straight Talk?
Yep.
Straight Talk. So Google that. But Dave, thanks for joining us, and you have a question for the candidate.
Thanks, Marty. This is a quick question regarding the Patriot Act. And, the Patriot Act was passed under the Bush administration, and essentially we turned over basically all of our liberties and freedoms to the government. Ben Franklin made the comment that any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. So the Patriot Act in principle seems fine to the extent you can trust the government. But recall that not long ago, during the Clinton administration, we had a presidential aide who was rifling through 500 FBI files on political opponents in the basement of the White House. So the question to the three of you, is where do you stand on the Patriot Act? And if you support it, how can you still protect civil liberties?
Who's first?
We'll start with Rob and we'll go down. Patriot Act, you for it? You're against it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I understand the initial intent. I mean, even Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, and we were at war after 9/11. I think that was a stopgap measure to try to gain a handle on these terrorists that had come into our country. I think what's evolved with the Patriot Act since is been a little abusive, and I think we need to rein that back in. I do still believe that we are at war and that Al-Qaeda and other forces are looking to kill us, and we need to act accordingly. And if we start to let our guard down in the interest of civil liberties, I mean, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. We are here to protect our citizens and protect our way of life, and to protect this for future generations. So I think in some cases I would support the Patriot Act, but I think we need to rein it in.
And forgive me for saying this again, I disagree with the premise of the question. I actually don't feel like my civil liberties have been impaired by the Patriot Act. I actually think the main provisions of the Patriot Act that allow for more intelligence gathering are crucial to getting knowledge not only foreignly but domestically about people who want to attack us. You know, in my hometown of Shelton, we had the New York City Times Square bomber living there right before he went into New York City and did this horrible, horrible thing he tried to do. I want more intelligence on that to be able to say where these people are and if they're planning to attack the United States. Because believe me, 9/11 was not the end. There are people out there, Al-Qaeda, and people even here domestically who want to hurt us. And we need to have the right intelligence to try to stop that before it happens.
Rick, your thoughts on this?
Well, this is one of those areas that if the other guys want to do a gotcha moment, they can get me. Because when I first started in my process of running for Congress, I was very strong on the Patriot Act. And to be honest, I think right now it's almost one of the clearest demonstrations to me that good government programs in bad hands are bad government programs.
Wait, give me that one more time slowly.
Good government programs,
right,
quote unquote, which
right,
there's no such thing, but good government programs in bad hands is a bad government program.
Okay.
And so now what the point about that is that, you know who's made me afraid? It's not Bush, because I wasn't afraid of Bush, but I'm afraid of Obama. And so now this program, now I understand liberals in their fear of Bush. Okay, they feared Bush. And so here's this mechanism that could, you know, investigate anyone. Clearly, they can get the bad guys, but at the same process, they're looking at everyone, including me, including you, Dan. God knows what they'll find out about us. They might find out something awful. But the point is that it's just not the American way. And Benjamin Franklin had it right, and that is the principled position. And so now I'm against it. And so there's your gotcha moment. You can fry me on that one.
All right, caller, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, you had a call. You had a question for the candidate. Go right ahead.
Yes, I do. I've been listening to your conversation on Medicare.
Okay, go ahead. The caller with the question for Dandy Vasella. Go right ahead.
Okay, as a Catholic who has said he is pro-choice, and a Republican who says he is a moderate, how can I trust or believe anything you say when you do not have the courage to stand on any principles?
Well,
all right. Thank you for the call. I appreciate you raising this subject. Let me just. So basically, you're a Catholic.
Yes.
And yet you're pro-choice.
That's correct.
And so how do you?
It's very simple. I actually think it's the very principled position. Is I'm personally pro-life as a Catholic, but I don't want the government forcing my beliefs on other people. Is quite frankly, you know, I hope that we can do away with abortion. I hope that, given where birth control is today, that we get rid of all unwanted pregnancies, because it's a horrible thing for women to go through. But I firmly believe that I don't want government telling women what to do with their bodies. And just because I'm personally pro-life, I'm not going to force that on other people. So I think it's the principled conservative position to say that we don't want government interfering in people's
What about partial
lives.
birth abortion? Would you come out against
I
that?
do. I also oppose the funding of abortion by the federal government, because those are controversial issues. And partial birth abortion is something that you say, geez, well, when a baby is 9 months developed and can survive outside the womb, it's a very different situation than you say a woman finds out she's pregnant after the first month.
Rick Torres.
I'm pro-life. I love babies. I do very much. I have 5. And I'm principled on that. I can't move off of that. And all I'll tell you is that what you just said, partial birth abortion. After
It's a grisly procedure.
Yeah, so it's grisly. How about at 5 months when they can survive? How about this one? Can we negotiate? Let's negotiate, okay? What if we take the baby out of the womb and put it down and see if it breathes? Can we do that? That sounds grisly too, doesn't it? Yeah. But after 5 months it does, see? And it has a heartbeat. And if you just give it a little bit of care, it survives. How do you feel about that being sucked out through a vacuum cleaner? I got issues with that. Okay, so now wait a second, hold on. The Constitution says protect life. Government says protect life. When it's a life, government has a duty to protect it. And so when is it a life? I'm a biologist, I don't know. So if I don't know, how do you? How do you?
All right. Rob?
Pro-life, always have been. It's not negotiable. The one thing that I do agree with is that the federal government is not deciding this issue because it's not specifically stated in the Constitution. But I agree with Rick's point. It says protect. We're entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and life comes first for a reason. But it's not just about abortion. There's stem cell research where they create embryos and then kill them to conduct research that doesn't go anywhere. When someone gets a bone marrow transplant, that's stem cell research, but that's on adults. Nobody dies. But the culture of death that Obama's been perpetrating and has been going on for years also applies to the aged and the rationing we're going to see with health care. You know, the quality of life score that Rahm Emanuel's brother wants to put forth to say, if you're 80 years old, you don't get a hip replacement. But if you're 40, yeah, because you got some usable life left. If you're 80, they're just going to give you some pain medicine and hope you die quickly. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all.
Dan, you want to follow up on any of this?
No, I side with women's rights on this. I am pro-choice.
All right. Caller, you waited. You're up. What's your question for the candidates?
My question dealt with a lot of the Medicare conversation you were having. What do you plan to do with people who are already on Medicare or already receiving Social Security? Are you planning to cut them, suggesting that you cut them, or do you leave that alone?
Excellent question. Thank you very much for holding. What about that? I mean, promises have been made, Social Security. We'll start with you and then we'll go around. What do you feel about that?
I don't think we should cut people who are currently getting Social Security. You know, you might do something like adjust the future rate of growth in Social Security to say that, you know, the adjustments, the annual adjustments that people get, maybe they shouldn't be as great as they've been in the past. But we can't be cutting current Social Security recipients or current Medicare recipients because they're owed that. But we can make changes to the programs that will actually extend the life. And this is where, you know, I take a little bit of exception with what Rick said before is, you know, Rick said redistribution in all cases is evil. Social Security is redistribution. We are redistributing from people who are working to people who are retired. And I think Social Security is a darn good program. It's something that I want to try to save if I get there. And I'm curious if my challengers here actually think that Social Security should be repealed or if they think it is a good program that should be saved.
Okay, we're in the lightning round now. Quickly, what do you first of all, Medicaid, Social Security, promises that have been made to folks. You hear in
no,
the tone of the
it's not a promise, it's a contract, and we must not violate the contract. Okay. That's absolute. But I will say this, it's not income redistribution because what happened was it was a promise. I put in, and someday I will get out. That's different than my going into your pocket and just ripping you off. Big difference. I am currently putting in, so are you and everyone here. We're all putting into the system in the hopes of someday getting something. The four of us here ain't getting anything, but that's another issue. But the people that are on it right now, they deserve to keep it. It's a contract.
All right, Rob, lightning round.
Well, you can't take the rug out from under people. So if they're already in Social Security or receiving benefits, they're on Medicare, Medicaid, obviously we have to protect that contract, as Rick says. But going forward, it's an unsustainable system. So you have to look at the fundamentals behind it so that it's not systemically bankrupt. And that means looking at means testing, at raising the age requirements, adjusting the payouts, and the cost of living adjustments. You know, these trust funds have been raided by Congress. It's their personal piggy bank, and so it's broke. And it's going to take decades for this to come back, if at all. Ultimately, I'd like to see it privatized.
Okay, we're going to take a very, very short break, and then we're going to go to some man-on-the-street interviews. Your intrepid reporter was out in front of Stop and Shop in 95-degree weather just to get the pulse of the people. And so we're going to take a quick break, or are we ready to go with this? We're ready to go? Oh, we're going to take a break. All right.
Parties say that they are fiscally solvent and that's what they're looking for.
Right.
Not true.
So specialized spending and taxes going up.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the questions.
Well, they'll have to answer that on live television. So specialized spending. Okay, Rick Torres, we'll start with you. The lightning round, what do you think about that? The earmarks, the specialized spending, it looks like people are just taking from Peter and getting to Paul and hoping Paul's going to vote for it.
One of the most outrageous things that we live with here in the 4th District is that we are the second highest tax district in the nation of 435 districts. 5 times the average. Okay, so of course I'm against earmarks, and I'm especially in favor of bringing back tax dollars and putting them back into the pockets of the people from whom they were taken.
Dan?
Eliminate all earmarks. I will not seek or accept any earmarks if I'm congressman. And then we actually have to repeal the stimulus and replace it with a tax cut. That's the way to get money back into people's pockets fast.
Well, I'm against earmarks unequivocally, and I think we need to cut taxes. I don't think repealing the stimulus and replacing it with a tax cut works. I think we need to repeal the stimulus. If you put another tax cut on top of that, you're basically, it's a shell game. And $1,500 is not going to allow me to hire anybody. But my objective is to shrink government and cut taxes so that the money stays here and gets put into businesses here, into infrastructure here, and we can control where it goes.
I think what you got with that lady who was just going shopping now, but basically is people are upset when they see what they did to get the health reform budget passed, and they see all these sweetheart deals for their home districts, and people are disgusted by it.
That's right.
And they see it's running us. All right, let's go. Next man on the street. Go ahead. Well, we're here with George, and he's been kind enough to agree to put a question to our congressional candidates that are running for office. And what was your question?
Well, my question would be, what purpose are we serving the American people by being in Afghanistan when the difficulties at home are so deep and so solid? We've got unemployment where your party actually is trying to keep unemployed people from having any help from the government. I don't understand that at all. We have a tradition here that goes back long before most of you were born, where we support the people who are in trouble in our society when it was caused not by them, but by others. And in this case, many of those problems were caused by the Republican Party. So why are we in Afghanistan, and why are you not supporting those people who need it most?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. We'll start with you. Lightning round. 2 issues: Afghanistan What are we going to do there? And then also, I think he's talking about the extension of unemployment benefits.
At first, I don't think that guy's voting for any of us. I think he's voting for the other party.
I have a little work to do with that, gentlemen.
But first off, on Afghanistan, this is one of the areas where President Obama has gotten it right. He was actually right to double the amount of troops that we have there. And the generals have been right to focus in on capturing and killing al-Qaeda and the Taliban in southeast Afghanistan. And we need to continue to do that. So it's, unlike Iran or some other areas where the president hasn't gotten it right, I actually do think we need to be in Afghanistan to stop those who want to attack the United States. And on unemployment benefits, we can't extend them further. There are already 99 weeks, almost 2 years of unemployment benefits. We can't afford to just say, we're going to have unemployments for 10 years, 20 years, however long you're unemployed, you can stay on the government dole. No, 2 years is very generous and plenty of time to help people, go find another job. There is a safety net there, and I think it's already very generous.
Okay, Rob?
Well, first of all, I don't think Obama got it right in Afghanistan at all. To go in and say we have a time frame for withdrawal is weakness and absurdity, and it just showcases his inexperience in the position. The truth about Afghanistan is al-Qaeda is there because it is a destabilized country, and they are working with the Taliban to keep it destabilized. That's where al-Qaeda has their base of operations, and it directly affects the United States because they're attacking us. The Times Square bomber that was living in Shelton, he was directly linked to a cell in Afghanistan. So we're there to protect us here. And as much as people don't want to admit that, there is a war going on. Secondly, in terms of the unemployment, there's two things that I would speak of with that. First of all, I wouldn't want to pull the rug out from under anybody. I'm not against an evergreen unemployment clause because I think it actually incentivizes people to not seek work.
Wait, what was that called?
Evergreen.
Evergreen
unemployment clause.
And what is that?
It's perpetually being extended. Okay. So people right now, they don't have the ultimate incentive to go out and and find work because they know the government's going to extend the benefits. The problem is, I feel the federal government, particularly in this instance, has made the employment situation worse, not better. We're at about 9.5% right now. We have 2.6 million people in this country who have stopped looking for work for whatever reason. They've just given up. And we can't say that the government made it worse and the government isn't going to try to help it. We need to fix it on both fronts.
Okay, Rick, lightning round, Afghanistan, unemployment.
Yeah, Afghanistan is a magnet. It draws bad guys. We fight there so we don't have to fight here. So it's good that we're there, and even though that gentleman really doesn't like the fact that we're spending billions of his, probably not his dollars, he's probably not paying those types of taxes, it's good that we're fighting there instead of here. And so it's good to have a theater of operation where people will be drawn to, so away from this country, it's a good thing. Unemployment insurance is what it is. There's an incentive for people to stay unemployed. It's kind of, a good period of time. You don't have to really look for work. You've got 26 weeks, and then they extend it to 54, and then they'll extend it again. That's wrong. People should have an incentive to go get a job as quickly as possible, and we shouldn't be paying people to stay home.
All right, next man on the street. I think you'll find this lady interesting. We're here with Angie in front of the Ridgefield Stop and Shop, and you have a couple questions for these gentlemen that are running for the United States Congress.
I sure do.
Fire ahead.
I came from Ireland in 1972, okay, to this wonderful country. I came in legal. I had to wait to get here. I had to do everything right. And it's not that I'm against immigrants. Obviously, I'm one, so I can't be. I just don't understand why they are suing Arizona, the Democrats, and what the Republicans are going to do about it. Are they going? I'm here 38 years, and you do it right. And why are they allowed to get away with it? And what are they going to do about it?
Excellent question. Spending and taxes. All right, so we'll start with you and we'll go around quickly. Immigration.
I think it's outrageous that the federal government is suing Arizona. I wonder why they're not going after sanctuary cities like Hartford and New Haven, or sanctuary states that deliberately don't enforce immigration laws. I'm not a fan of amnesty because I believe it rewards illegal behavior, and the illegal immigrants in this country suppress American wages. They take jobs from American citizens, and as Republicans, we have an obligation to defend our borders and our citizens.
Okay, Mr. Torres?
Illegal immigration is illegal. They broke the law. Don't defend that in any way. There's no chance that we should support it. And believe me, even the people that came here illegally, recognize that they broke the law and that someday they may have to pay. Now, I'm not in favor of mass exportation, but I'm certainly not in favor of giving amnesty to anybody. Second question, was there another one? That's it.
That was the gist of it. Oh, okay.
You know, the answer to our immigration problems is twofold. First, we have to expand legal immigration. It's too hard to come to this country right now. And if you have a job and an employer lined up who's willing to sponsor you, welcome. We want people to live the American dream. But once we do that and allow people who want to come here and work to come here, then you have to crack down on illegal immigrants. And I do think you deport them at that point when you say, look, we've given you a clear legal path. If you're here illegally, illegal is illegal and you'll be deported.
All right. Caller, you waited a long time. Do you have a question for the candidates?
I do. Do you support eliminating Jimmy Carter's billion-dollar waste in the Federal Department of Education? And I will hang up and listen to you.
Well, before you go, if you're still there, you said Jimmy Carter's billion-dollar waste in the education program. Is that what you said?
Department of Education.
Federal Department of Education.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, I'll have that. Thank you for holding. Why don't we start with you, Dan?
Education belongs on the state level.
Yeah, I think there's a pattern here. Like you're talking about the EPA and what's going on in the Gulf now in education. The more government is localized, the lower the pyramid, I think the better. It seems like the federal level is just this behemoth bureaucracy that isn't very agile. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll be brief. The Department of Education is unconstitutional. It must be eliminated.
You know, I'm feeling the love here. I'm sensing harmony.
Eliminate it, no question.
Wow.
It's been a waste of time and money.
Well, listen, I really, really appreciate you guys coming in. We're at the end here now, and each of you has 2 minutes to appeal to the voters. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more question, one more man on the street question, and this will be a super lightning round. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Here we are with successful businessman. We'll just go with the first name, that being Lawrence. But Lawrence was kind enough to stop his swank imported car here and ask a few questions. Go ahead. What's your question for the candidate, Lawrence?
I guess my first question would be his position on the health care and if it should be rejected.
So the federal health care that was passed, if the new Congress comes in, should they reject it or just move ahead with it?
That is correct.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking your time. You know, this air conditioning is really very nice. I'd like to just climb in with you.
All right, there you go. We go to great lengths to get these questions. Real quick, your thoughts on what the gentleman talked about?
Eliminate health care. We're not going to be able to overturn it, I think, in 2010, but we can zero fund it in 2011.
Repeal Obamacare, but replace it with something that really cuts costs for the middle class.
Rick?
Nationalized health care is a disgraceful example of the overreach of the national government, and it's absolutely unconstitutional. It shouldn't be replaced with anything governmental whatsoever. Medicare and Medicaid have destroyed this country, and that will only add to it. Please.
The Peanut Gallery. Dave Stride has a question.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Thanks a lot. It seems every time a politician gets elected, they get elected by promising to do stuff. And every time they do stuff, it expands the reach of government and expands the costs to the taxpayer. So regardless of which of you gets elected tonight, can I get your solemn promise to vote against every single piece of legislation that comes across your desk? And if someone accuses you of being the party of no, that you would look them in the eye and say, you're wrong, I'm not the party of no, I'm the party of hell no.
Okay, Rick, we'll start with you and go down there.
I'm not entirely sure I understood the full...
He wants you to vote against everything because we're spending way too much money and proudly be the party of no.
You have to. I'll certainly vote against unconstitutional programs. I'll vote. I'd use the Constitution as my guide, but no, I won't pledge to vote no for everything.
Absolutely not. I will vote yes when it's right and no when it's not. And I firmly disagree with the premise of the question. We should not be the party of no. We should be the party of ideas, because our ideas are better than the Democrats.
Rob?
I agree to vote for everything that increases taxes, that doesn't offset with saving somewhere else.
You mean vote against everything?
Vote against, yes. Okay. But you can't categorically say you vote against every piece of legislation, because not every piece of legislation is bad.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. We're going to go to the closing comments right now. Or Al Robinson has a quick question.
One real quick, I'll be real fast. In light of obviously one of you guys, whoever's going to win, you have a Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele made some comments that were rather controversial. Some people were asking for his resignation in light of his comments about the Afghanistan war. What are your views? Do you think Michael Steele should step down, yes or no?
Rick, we'll start with you.
Boy, that is a hard question. Think about what that means.
You're running for a hard job.
That's why you paid the big bucks,
I have
Rick.
a lot of issues with Michael Steele. A lot of issues. And many of the issues have to do with the fact that he is too liberal on a lot of issues. That specific issue, no, I don't specifically think that he's
Dan?
Yes, but not just because of that reason. He's actually failed our party in a number of areas, including fundraising, et cetera, et cetera.
Rob?
I think the failure of our party has been local, so I'm not going to hang somebody for an offhand comment. I mean, he has done some good things for the party, and frankly, it's not my fight.
So we got a yes, a no, and a maybe. All right, Rick, we're going to start with you. You have a minute closing comment, and go right ahead. Go right ahead.
He says we have 2 minutes. I don't know. Look, I'm running for Congress because I adore my nation. I adore everything about it. I am not a wealthy man, but I have found my happiness, and I've pursued it and found it and grabbed it. This country deserves to provide that for future generations. This country has demonstrated to the rest of the world how wonderful freedom is. And without this country's freedom, the rest of the world cannot exist in freedom. So this country must be restored to the strength and the character that it once had. A strength and character that existed for 160 years, very strongly. And we must decide that we are going to, we've got messages all over the place. At the end of the day, folks, I'd like to tell you that please understand this. I love my country because I've experienced tyranny in socialist Cuba. This country must stay free. Please help us by electing someone that will always stand by the Constitution.
Dan?
Now, Marty, thank you for having us here tonight. I think you've seen we have 3 solid fiscal conservatives who are all running. All of us will agree on most of the issues. What we need is a candidate who can actually defeat Jim Himes and make sure we have Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi next year. I think that I've proven through 2 successful elections in a swing district and by gaining the support of over 77% of the delegates at the convention that I am the right choice to take on Jim Himes and return Congress to Republican control.
Rob?
I'm going to address my associates here. Dan, you talk about being a Reagan conservative. Well, Reagan was pro-life, and you're not. And I think the people of this district are sick and tired of professional politicians. And I'm the only one on this table who has never had any political experience. In fact, when you were in the state senate in 2007, you voted for a budget that eliminated a $900 million surplus and raised taxes, even though you knew it was a bad budget. And I quote, "I've learned that through my colleagues, if you don't let perfect be the enemy of good, I think people deserve better than that. Vote Merkel."
Thank you very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. And maybe we can do it again when one of you, and we'll have that other guy on the other side. I forget who it is. Thanks a lot. Join us next week for Ideas of Work and Beyond, and we'll see what we're going to do. Thanks for joining us.